Yeah, hello and welcome to the Wednesday episode of Stand Up. My guest is Jared Yates Sexton. We get started at about 50 minutes in the show. Got a lot of great clips for you on today's episode. But I do have your headlines and clips here on a Wednesday. Thank you very much for pressing play, for subscribing. Welcome to all new paid subscribers. I am so happy to have you here, and every time I see a new one come in, it's positive reinforcement that I'm doing something right here. Thank you to everybody who reached out to let me know how much you enjoyed the conversation with Dr. Anahita Dua the other day, 2 shows ago, because there was a lot of disagreement during that conversation, a lot of different arguments being made, but people mostly, overwhelmingly, appreciated and enjoyed it and got a lot out of it, so I appreciate all that feedback. Sorry about yesterday's audio levels. Apparently, my levels were low. I heard from a few of you on that, and I will make sure. I don't know exactly what happened, but I apologize. How embarrassing. What a terrible thing. I listened to it. I could hear it fine. I wasn't sure, but some people said my levels were low. Sorry about my levels yesterday. I hope to see you at tomorrow night's hangout. I'll be hosting a hangout tomorrow night, and yeah, I think that's all I wanted to say here at the top, other than I hope you are doing okay. Always want to wish the best for you and your journey on your journey along with me here, because every day is a gift, but every day can also be a struggle on and off. And I hear from lots of people who listen to the show or are part of our stand-up community each and every day. And some people obviously doing better than others. Shout out to Kerry Williams and his mom, who is out of surgery. She had a bit of an issue, and thinking about you, buddy, and everybody else out there who is dealing with something or anything similar, a health issue or financial issue, relationship issue, depression, anxiety, whatever it is that you're dealing with, you are not alone, and we are here with you. Head over to the Discord platform if you are a paid subscriber and jump in there and chat about it around, share links, debunk things with each other, promote or share an idea in there. Just want to remind you that you're not alone. All right, let's get to the headlines that I've gathered for you today here on Wednesday, June 18th, 2025. Obviously, a tremendous amount of news related to what is happening vis-a-vis the war between Israel and Iran. It seems to have begun this conflict that we have been worried about forever. And will it last days? Will it last weeks? Will it last years? Will America join in is the big question everybody's asking. And it looks like we will. It looks like we are. It looks like we're supporting, at least, Israel and its attack on Iran. Iran prepping missiles for possible retaliatory strikes on U.S. bases, according to officials. Conflict enters a 6th day. Our Mad King is weighing his options and making all kinds of threats. Iran fired a pair of overnight missile barrages at Israel, and the Ayatollah, the supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, declared on Twitter, "The battle begins," and called for showing no mercy towards Israelis. Is it just tough talk or not? There were no reports or injuries in the successive attacks, but a fire was sparked in a parking lot in central Israel, damaging 20 cars. So there's that. Also, there is a real split in MAGA over this between the right-wing pundits and some in Congress, saying that he needs congressional approval, of course. We heard that from Thomas Massie, a Republican congressman who supports it and introduced a bill and authorization. Also, I'll have some audio from the Democratic senator of Virginia, Tim Kaine, saying the same thing on the Senate floor yesterday. In other news outside Iran and Israel, Russia launched hundreds of drones and dozens of missiles at Ukraine yesterday, hitting dozens of civilian targets in Kiev, including a large apartment block, killing at least 15 people and wounding scores. Ukrainian officials said the president, Vladimir Zelensky, said the Russian forces sent more than 440 drones and 32 missiles at Ukraine. He described the destruction in Kiev as among the most horrific in the capital of the war. Coming back here to home. New York mayoral candidate and New York City comptroller Brad Lander, is running for mayor, of course, was arrested, handcuffed, and pushed against a wall by federal agents at Immigration Courthouse in Lower Manhattan. He's a Democrat. He was trying to escort a migrant whom agents were trying to arrest, something that he has been doing for the past few weeks. He joins a growing list of Democratic Party officials who now have been either detained, arrested, or even roughed up by ICE enforcement in masks, who have become a regular presence at the city's immigration courts, where the agency has ramped up arrests of migrants who show up for routine court hearings. In a statement, Department of Homeland Security officials said that Brad Lander was arrested for assaulting law enforcement and impeding a federal officer. He definitely didn't assault anybody. You could argue he impeded a federal officer, but you definitely can't say that he arrested or that he assaulted anybody. Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem was rushed to the hospital, apparently, as a result of some kind of allergic reaction she's having. I'm guessing her allergic reaction was to Corey Lewandowski, who she's clearly having an affair with. I mean, I don't know. You can look that up. Google their names. It's pretty... He's there a lot. He's always around. Okay, but thought that was worth mentioning there. The Department of Homeland Security in the hospital last night. I hope she's okay. I hope she gets the same treatment the immigrants, the undocumented people that she is shipping out gets. Yesterday, lawmakers pressed for more security after the Minnesota attacks. Top congressional security official told senators yesterday that protection around lawmakers had increased following the assassination of a legislator in Minnesota. The Capitol Police investigated 9,474 threats to lawmakers, their families, and staff last year, an increase of nearly 1,500 compared with 2023, and close to the highest level of threats on record. By the way, the adult children of Melissa and Mark Hortman issued a public statement, which they describe them as the bright lights at the center of their lives. Sophie and Colin Hortman say they are devastated and heartbroken by their parents' shocking killings by suspected assassin Vance Bolter. But they say they're safe and with loved ones. And in a quote they put out, they write, "Hope and resilience are the enemy of fear. Our parents lived their lives with immense dedication to their fellow humans. This tragedy must become a moment for us to come together. Hold your loved ones a little closer. Love your neighbors. Treat each other with kindness and respect. The best way to honor our parents' memory is to do something, whether big or small, to make our community just a little better for someone else." I love that. So I wanted to share it here. Let's head to Los Angeles, where the mayor there, Karen Bass, yesterday lifted this nighttime curfew she'd imposed last week in the downtown district of the nation's second largest city to quell protests over federal immigration raids. Since this past weekend's demonstrations, the mayor said arrests and skirmishes with the police had declined markedly. So can the Marines go home too, or are they just going to stay there doing nothing? Another unsettling resignation yesterday. It was one of the top scientists at the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. Her name was Dr. Fiona Havers, and she oversaw respiratory virus surveillance, and she resigned. Raised concerns about the future of vaccine policy as Health and Human Services Secretary and madman Robert F. Kennedy Jr. upends the agency's longstanding approach to immunization. I'll be talking with Dr. Zatz about that in the woods today. Looking forward to our Wednesday hike, and we always talk about RFK, so looking forward to his thoughts on that. The NAACP announced yesterday that Trump will be the first time that the president will not be invited to its national convention next month. It said it's the first time in 116 years that the sitting president will not be invited. I wonder why. It's just too much. He's just too much of a white supremacist that this year the NAACP is like, nah, you can't come and use us as a platform to get attention, you dumb motherfucker. And a unanimous Wisconsin Supreme Court sided with the Democratic state attorney yesterday in a long-running battle over a law passed by Republicans who wanted to weaken the office in a lame duck legislative session more than 6 years ago. So that's good. And this is good too. How about this? The MyPillow guy, Mike Lindell. Well, a federal jury in Colorado found that Lindell, one of the country's most prominent election conspiracy theorists, had actually defamed a former employee of a leading voting equipment company after the 2020 presidential election. So I thought that was good too. All right, there you go. Those are the headlines that I've got for you for today's show. What did I miss? Email me, standupwithpete@gmail.com. Now it's time to get to the clip show. A lot of clips related to the Middle East, as of course you could imagine. But first, before we get to that, let's check in with our friend Kevin Richberg, who's got the only story that matters, a reminder for us almost every day here.
The only story that matters is that Trump lacks the most basic knowledge necessary to be president. Trump told everyone in Tehran, the capital city of Iran, currently under Israeli bombardment, to evacuate. Everyone. He said everyone there should evacuate. To where, Mr. President? To where? Tehran is a city of 10 million people, 17 million people if you count the suburbs. Where the fuck are they going to go? Just walk out into the mountains? That's like telling the entire populations of Nebraska, Kansas, Iowa, Arkansas, and Missouri all to leave their homes. Mr. President, your brain doesn't work. I'm surprised he didn't suggest, while all these people were leaving their homes to become the mountain people, he didn't just tell them to inject themselves with bleach for good measure. The only story that matters is that individuals without even a 6th grade level of knowledge of the world we live in cannot properly execute any of the duties of the presidency. It absolutely begs the question, why do we, and I'm looking straight at you, American media, all keep pretending this isn't actually happening in real life right now to everyone with real world life and death consequences?
There you go, Kevin Richberg, the only story that matters. Brought to you by Slate Hill Edible Forest. That's Kevin's farm in upstate New York that will all be gathering September 5th through 7th. I hope that you'll come. Kevin's a riot, believe it or not, even though he is. He's the best. You know him. You love him. And there he is. Now on to the rest of the clips that I've gathered for you today. Of course, I've got to start with this clip that went viral last night when Tucker Carlson, I don't know, put this out. The full interview, I think he airs today on whatever his platform is. But Tucker Carlson somehow got Senator Ted Cruz to sit down with him, and he took him completely, I think, off guard, and he embarrassed and humiliated Ted Cruz. It was amazing. And a lot of people who hate Tucker Carlson, like me, were saying, if this is what he's going to do, we are absolutely fine with it, because we definitely do not want to get into a war with Iran.
How many people live in Iran, by the way?
I don't know the population.
At all?
No, I don't know the population.
You don't know the population of the country you seek to topple?
How many people live in Iran?
92 million.
Okay. Yeah.
How could you not know that?
I don't sit around memorizing population tables.
Well, it's kind of relevant because you're calling for the overthrow of the government.
Why is it relevant whether it's 90 million or 80 million or 100 million? Why is that relevant?
Because if you don't know anything about the country...
I didn't say I don't know anything about
Okay, what's the ethnic mix of Iran?
They are Persians and predominantly Shia. Okay,
it's not even... You don't know anything about Iran. So
okay, I am not the Tucker Carlson expert on Iran.
You're a senator who's calling for the overthrow of the government.
You're the one who
don't know anything about the country.
No, you don't know anything about the country. You're the one who claims they're not trying to murder Donald Trump. You're the one who can't figure out if it was a good idea to kill General Soleimani, and you said it was bad.
You don't believe they're trying to murder Trump.
Yes, I do.
Because you're not calling for military strikes against them in retaliation. And if you really believe that...
We're carrying out military strikes today.
You said Israel was.
Right, with our help. I said we. Israel is leading them, but we're supporting them.
Well, you're breaking news here, because the U.S. government last night denied, the National Security Council spokesman Alex Pfeiffer denied on behalf of Trump that we were acting on Israel's behalf in any offensive capacity.
No, we're not bombing them. Israel's bombing them.
You just said we were.
We are supporting Israel.
High stakes. You're a senator. If you're saying the United States government is at war with Iran right now, people are listening.
Yeah, wow. That is That was some. Ted Cruz went right over to Fox News last night. By the way, went on Hannity and started screaming and complaining on about Iran. So yeah, he's hitting the war drums as hard as he can. But so many others are pumping the brakes and saying we need authorization for this. Here's Senator Tim Kaine.
There's no part of the Constitution that's more important than the Article 1 provisions making plain that the United States should not be at war without a vote of Congress. And yet the news of the day suggests that we are potentially on the verge of a war with Iran. When I was elected to the Senate in 2012, having served as a governor from 2006 to 2010 during a tremendous upsurge in the two wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, I visited our troops multiple times in the Green Zone in Baghdad and in Afghanistan. I went to the deployments and the homecomings. I went to the wakes and the funerals. And I told myself when I came to the Senate that if I ever had the chance to stop this nation from getting into an unnecessary war, I would do everything I could to stop us from getting into an unnecessary war. I happen to believe that the United States engaging in a war against Iran, a third war in the Middle East since 2001, would be a catastrophic blunder for this country. I think there are some in this body who have a different point of view than me on that point, but I think we should all be able to agree that the fundamental constitutional principle that says we shouldn't be in a war if Congress doesn't have the guts to debate it and vote on it, we should all, having taken an oath to the Constitution, at least support the principle that war is something that should be for Congress to declare.
Yeah, there you go. And that is Democratic Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia. Now let's go to Bernie Sanders, who put out a video last night. This video is about 6 minutes long, but I listened to every word of it because I think the context matters. And coming from anti-war Bernie Sanders, whose bona fides on the issue are strong, I thought it mattered. Here he is for 6 minutes. If you don't like it, you want to jump ahead, you can fast forward now, but maybe you've got rubber gloves on because you're doing the dishes and it's hard to do that. And you're stuck listening to Bernie like sometimes I am with other people, but I didn't feel stuck while listening to him on this.
In the year 2025, one might have hoped that the global community would be working together to address the existential threat of climate change, working to prevent future pandemics, working to address the massive levels of income and wealth inequality that exist, working to improve the standard of living of struggling people all over the world. But tragically, that is not where we are today. Quite the contrary. Instead of addressing the major crises that we face, the world is now looking at the terrible war in Ukraine, started by Putin, which has taken hundreds of thousands of lives over the last 3 years. We are looking at the horrific war in Gaza, where, as we speak, thousands of Palestinian children are facing starvation due to Israel's inhumane and illegal war policies. And now we face a dangerous and escalating war in Iran, which was begun in violation of international law by the extremist Netanyahu government. And the main point that I want to make today is that it is absolutely imperative that the United States not be dragged into this war. Let me say a word about how this war began. On Thursday, Netanyahu launched an illegal and unilateral surprise attack on Iran, bombing targets across the country and killing hundreds of people. Iran has responded with attacks of its own, which have killed dozens of people in Israel. Whatever you may think of the corrupt and authoritarian Iranian regime, Israel's attack clearly violated international law and the United Nations Charter. While every country has the right to defend itself, they do not have the right to launch so-called preemptive wars of this kind. But let's remember who Netanyahu is. He is a war criminal under indictment by the International Criminal Court for starving innocent people and killing civilians in Gaza. At this very moment, in Gaza, Israel continues to prevent the UN from delivering humanitarian aid, And just today in Gaza, Israeli tanks fired into a crowd desperately trying to collect food, killing at least 59 people. So it should come as little surprise that Netanyahu ignored international law to start this war with Iran. But Netanyahu's decision to strike also directly contravened the express wishes of the United States, which was seeking a diplomatic resolution to the long-standing tensions around Iran's nuclear program. In recent months, the United States has held 5 rounds of negotiations with Iran to resolve these long-standing concerns. Let me repeat. In recent months, the United States has held 5 rounds of negotiations with Iran to resolve these long-standing concerns. A 6th round of talks was planned for Sunday, but Netanyahu chose instead to start this war. So let's be clear. Israel's attack was specifically designed to sabotage American diplomatic efforts. In fact, in its first round of strikes, Israel assassinated the man overseeing Iran's nuclear negotiating team. And let's also remember that U.S. intelligence has never indicated that Iran has made the decision to build a nuclear weapon. Just a few months ago, Trump's own Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, testified to Congress that, quote, the intelligence community continues to assess that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, end of quote. But Netanyahu chose to attack, crippling diplomatic efforts and risking a full-blown regional war. He is now openly talking about regime change in Iran and threatening to kill the political leadership of that country without any thought to the chaos that might ensue. Let's also not forget that the current Islamic regime in Iran is itself the product of a Western-backed coup in 1953 that overthrew the democratically elected government of Iran and replaced it with a corrupt autocrat. The critical question now is whether the United States will get dragged into Netanyahu's war. In my view, that would be a disaster. The United States must not be involved with another Netanyahu war, not militarily or financially. The United States Constitution is crystal clear. There can be no offensive use of military force against Iran or any other country without an explicit authorization from Congress. No such authorization exists, and any U.S. involvement would therefore be illegal. The United States has already provided hundreds of billions of dollars to Israel over the last many decades. Last year alone, U.S. taxpayers provided more than $22 billion in military aid to Israel. Meanwhile, while providing massive aid to Israel, we have Americans sleeping out on the street, unable to afford health care or other basic necessities. Enough is enough. President Trump ran as a supposed peace candidate. In his inaugural address, he said, and I quote, "My proudest legacy will be that of a peacemaker and unifier. That's what I want to be, a peacemaker and a unifier," end quote. Very fine words. Trump should remember them today. Supporting Netanyahu's war against Iran would be a catastrophic mistake. Instead of going to war, Trump must work with the international community to rein in Netanyahu and urgently push for a diplomatic solution. Netanyahu's illegal attack has made the world a more dangerous place. The United States must not be a part of this war. Thank you very much.
All right. There you go. Senator Bernie Sanders. I thought that was great, so I included the whole thing. And I also wanted to play a clip from Wendy Sherman's appearance last night on MSNBC's All In with Chris Hayes. Wendy Sherman is a former United States Deputy Secretary of State, and she helped negotiate the Iran deal back in 2015, was it? And I thought this was very important of her to say.
83 days. I mean, Is there any reason to doubt that the Director of National Intelligence was misrepresenting the consensus opinion of U.S. intelligence agencies about what the nuclear program was doing?
So I'm not a big fan of Tulsi Gabbard as head of our national intelligence, but nonetheless, she has given the assessment that has longstanding been our assessment, that indeed the Supreme Leader has not made a decision to go for a nuclear weapon. But more importantly, besides getting a stockpile of enriched uranium to the point that allows for a nuclear bomb, you then have to weaponize it, and then you have to attach it to a delivery system. Right. All of those steps are probably years away from completion. Certainly not something that's happening today. There is no question that Iran has increased its capability, now enriching up to 60%. It has to get to 90% to be weapons grade, so it's not far away. They can do some of their work with computers in a room, but there is no question they don't yet have the delivery system. They certainly haven't created a bomb, and they certainly haven't put all the pieces together.
All right, there you go. Wendy Sherman last night on MSNBC. And Dave Smith is a comedian and leader of the New Libertarian Movement in the United States of America. And he was on a YouTube show yesterday. I meant to play this yesterday, but I thought this was significant that Dave Smith, who is a Trump supporter, said this yesterday.
Come back to the negotiating table now is a joke.
Yeah.
I mean, what a impotent leader to be sitting there talking about coming back to the negotiating table. It's like sitting after Pearl Harbor and telling FDR, now's the time to go negotiate with the Japanese. Right. Negotiations are over now. The time for negotiations was before this. And so, yeah, Donald Trump looks, and man, I supported him this last year. I apologize for doing so. It was a bad calculation. At the time, it seemed like the right one. But he should be impeached and removed for this one. Wow. And not on some not on some ridiculous Nancy Pelosi. Of course, the Congress will never do it because they're all a bunch of, corrupt hacks.
This is the one thing they support. This is
Donald Trump should be impeached and removed for this. All of his supporters should turn on him. It's the absolute betrayal of everything that he ran and campaigned on and everything that he stood for. And I will say, despite the fact that, Donald Trump supporters have been labeled like a cult following, and that certainly is true for a percentage of his supporters, he is going to lose his coalition over this. I don't just speak for myself when I say there are a lot of us who simply will not go along with this. So it's just a devastating mistake. By the way, on top of that, he's also going to lose the deportation fight because of this. Because right now he needed all the political capital he could have to turn that, you got a majority support for deportations, but the minority is very mobilized and they're out and they're protesting all around the country. He needed all of his political capital for that move. So here's what we got. The neocons win. More war abroad and, bomb the world and invite the world. No matter who you vote for, you always get John McCain.
All right. I have no idea what that means. No matter who you vote for, you always get John McCain. I don't much care for Dave Smith or his takes, but I do think that was important. And I just want to mention Democrats overwhelmingly voted against the war in Iraq. Way too many voted for it, but most voted against it. Look it up. That's right. Some high profile people like John Kerry and Hillary Clinton voted for it, regretted their vote later, not too long later, but still. So I don't know what he's talking about with that whole John McCain thing. All right, another clip that created some controversy yesterday, and I'm not well, I understand why, but I fully agree with this take from Congresswoman Sarah McBride of Delaware. She sat down with New York Times' Ezra Klein, and she was talking about the trans rights movement. Of course, she is the first trans woman in Congress, openly a trans person in Congress, and probably the first overall, I'm guessing. But she had this great point that she made, and I didn't think it was that controversial, but a lot of people that are part of the kind of pro-trans side, which I would include myself in, took issue with it. And I think we can be for all of trans rights that matter, that are human rights, that are civil rights, and say, yeah, I don't think trans girls should be playing sports. I don't think trans girls should be playing sports myself. I mean, not most sports. I think it could be decided at the local level, at the school board level, maybe, because there's so few trans girls who do this, and it could depend on the sport. It could depend on the other schools in the league, and it's nuanced. But I mean, I just don't think that this is a huge thing that matters. I do think, obviously, all of the rest of the rights they should have, but this is Sarah McBride basically saying that, a lot smarter than me. A lot of people took issue with it, but I thought it was really clear, and I thought she's brilliant if you've ever heard her speak, but here it is.
You have to be perfect on every trans rights issue for us to say you can be an ally and part of our coalition. Then we're going to have a cap of about 30% on our coalition. If we are going to have 50% plus one, or frankly, more necessarily 60% or more in support of non-discrimination protections for trans people, in support of our ability to get the health care that we need, by definition, it will have to include a portion of the 70% who oppose trans people's participation in sports. And right now, the message from so many is you're not welcome. And your support for 90% of these policies is irrelevant. The fact that you diverge on one thing makes you evil. And it also misunderstands the history of civil rights in this country. I mean, you can't compromise on civil rights is a great tweet. But tell me, which Civil Rights Act delivered all progress and all civil rights for people of color in this country? The Civil Rights Act of 1957, the Civil Rights Act of 1960, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, the Civil Rights Act of 1968, or any of the civil rights acts that have been passed since the 1960s. That movement was disciplined. It was strategic. It picked its battles. It picked its fights. And it compromised to move the ball forward. And right now, that compromise would be deemed unprincipled, weak, and throwing everyone under the bus. And that is so counterproductive. It is so harmful, and it completely betrays the lessons of every single social movement and civil rights movement in our country's history.
A lot of people in the trans rights movement were really upset with that. And it was interesting to see it play out. What do you think? Look forward to talking with you about that one. Here is Senator Alex Padilla, California senator who was detained, tackled by FBI agents, I think they were, at the Department of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem's press conference last week. Here he is yesterday on the Senate floor for about 2.5 minutes.
But a couple of weeks ago, it seemed that Donald Trump was at the lowest point of his presidency so far. He was drowning in a week of terrible headlines. The American people were finally waking up to the realities of the budget reconciliation bill that will cut health care, nutrition assistance, and good-paying, clean energy jobs while reducing the tax burden on billionaires. He was losing his tariff wars as the costs for everyday goods were continuing to rise. His promises to end Russia's invasion of Ukraine were falling flat, and he'd been handed loss after loss in federal court. He even had a very public breakup with Elon Musk. And I mention this only because we know what happens when the headlines turn on Donald Trump. When Donald Trump is having a bad week, he turns to the same tired playbook he always has. When in doubt, scapegoat immigrants and manufacture a crisis to distract the media from what's going on. That's the reason ICE raids ramped up in California. And when Californians took to the streets to peacefully protest, he bypassed the governor and federalized the National Guard. And even with their presence over a couple of days, as things began to settle, he escalated even further by sending in the Marines. He wants the spectacle, not just to distract, but to justify his undemocratic crackdowns and his authoritarian power grabs. That's the reason why, even though the vast majority of protests have remained peaceful, what a weekend. That notwithstanding, the president, the vice president, and their allies have continued to call all the protesters out there insurrectionists. Yes, this is the same man who provoked an actual insurrection at our Capitol on January 6th. The same man who incited a violent mob carrying Confederate flags against Congress. The same man who then pardoned the convicted felons who assaulted our brave Capitol police officers. Donald Trump is continuing to test the boundaries of his power, and he's surrounded himself with yes men and underqualified attack dogs, from the DHS secretary to the FBI director to the Secretary of Defense, who will rubber stamp every anti-democratic step he takes.
There you go, Senator Padilla, and that's, I think it was like a 20-minute floor speech, and I might not have grabbed the most dramatic or best part, but I did want to share that one with you. Also, I've got a clip from Brad Lander, who was a subject of a tremendous amount of attention yesterday. We were all watching yesterday afternoon as he was trying to accompany migrants and trying to bring them out of detention and get them out, as our friend Amanda Brooks talked about how she was doing that. So many other Americans are trying to do that. In California is where Amanda's trying to do it. And it's scary. It's somewhat dangerous. It's brave, I think. And Brad Lander is a New York City comptroller and a candidate for mayor. So it's pretty easy to say these Democratic politicians that are putting themselves in the way are doing it for political purposes to try to get attention. Well, I just thought this exchange between Chris Hayes and Brad Lander was great. I thought it was important, and I think it's very, very valuable that Brad Lander, of course, refers to the nonviolent peace movement and what he has learned from those who have come before us.
What do you think that does to the city, just in terms of like the safety? And not just this city, all the other cities, all the other places that are now being targeted with precisely this kind of enforcement?
Yeah, look, Trump is trying to ratchet up conflict. He wants it to happen. That's what today was about. That's what doing this to ICE agents about. That's what sending the National Guard into L.A. is. And it's part of our challenge. We have to show up and do things like I did today. And we have to find ways to do it that are de-escalating, because we can't allow them to use conflict and violence to turn it into a police state.
Well, that's really the question, right? Like, I think there's some line of thinking that says Ras Baraka, mayor of Newark, Congressman McIver, who was not arrested at the time but then subsequently charged by DHS, Alex Padilla, arrested or handcuffed and put on the floor, you today, that these are Democratic politicians picking these fights, making a stand, causing a ruckus for political purposes, either for their own political interests or to raise the salience of the issue. The other side of this argument would be like, these people are out of control and they're initiating it. Like, when you woke up today, were you trying to get arrested?
I mean, I had hoped what would happen was what happened last week and the week before, that I could walk peacefully out of the building with these families so they could reunite with their kids and continue to make their application for asylum. That is all I wanted.
So you think, I mean, you can't know. But does it feel to you like they made the decision for this to be? I mean,
when you just read that part from the city about what the agent said a couple of minutes before about talking about arresting me, I had not heard that before you just reported it. I didn't hear that at the time. But what I can see is that Trump is trying to escalate conflict. He wants to bait and provoke, and we have to find a way. I mean, look, this is what the nonviolent tradition is. You find a way to bear witness, to accompany people, and to do it in ways that don't escalate violence or conflict. That is our challenge.
All right. Well done. Well said. Very well said. I was inspired by that, as a matter of fact. I really appreciated it. All right. Well, that's all the news clips I've got for you. Now it's time for some comedy. I got 4 clips for you. First, I've got about a 1-minute clip of J.L. Covan talking to an audience member at his show over the weekend. Our friend Mark Lipsky brought him down for a last-minute replacement at a stand-up comedy show in Philadelphia, and he went down as Trump on stage. He's in full garb, and he's taking questions from the audience. And I just thought this is funny because it's, in the moment improv. These are my favorite moments. Here's about a minute from that show the other night. JL as Trump.
We have an immigrant over here. What?
Well, get her the hell out. Look at that guy. That guy wants to be my next Department of Homeland Security. Move over Kristi Noem. We got tall snitch in the back. Well, I always open it up. I like to open it up to questions from people. I always want to talk to their president. Obviously, I can talk a lot longer than you. But if anybody has a question, not just accusations from the back, we love. And is it a she?
Yeah, she's from Thailand.
And we're sure it's a she?
Yeah, our boy is killing it. I think he's going to join me today, so look for that. I'm not sure what time, but scheduled to talk to him some point here on the Wednesday. Go to youtube.com/standupwithpete to subscribe, and you can see us talking live on YouTube. And now here's a little bit more from JL. Here is about a 3-minute bit of him doing Trump talking about invading Iran, which I thought was really funny.
We have a very important decision. This is when you're the president, you have to make sort of unbelievable decisions. I mean, you think it's a big job, and then you get the job, and you say, "Oh, these are big decisions, not just sort of like, yes, do this." But we're talking a war. We're talking bombs. We're talking big. They call them bunker buster. You ever heard of this? This is unbelievable. I never heard of these until I was president. And they send these bombs in the sky, and they're big. Oh, these are big bombs. And, the people, they think they're safe. They're deep underground. They say, oh, nothing can get us, nothing can get us. And all of a sudden they hear that beautiful but also scary sound of a bunker buster just busting their bunker. And then it's bye-bye. It's no more. And we don't want to do that, but we sort of want to do it. I got to be honest. I didn't want to. I'm very anti-war. I don't like war. Unless it's war on poor people and wokeness and people of color and, poor children and things. I like those wars. But we don't have, you see these movies now, they have the war. It's brutal. It's absolutely brutal. We don't want that. We don't want that kind of brutality. Is what it's called. Like, that's when things are brutal. You call it brutality. And what we do want is peace. But then I tried to have a peaceful military parade with drunk Pete Hegseth and my wife, Melanoma, sitting next to me, looking very beautiful, honoring the U.S. military, even though she's from Transylvania. And our crowds were terrible, and it was cold and rainy, and I felt very weak and upset, and I had nobody to blame but myself. And then all of a sudden, Bibi Netanyahu in Israel starts just going to town on Iran, okay? He just starts bombing the crap out of them. And I disagreed with it because I thought he was going to lose and everybody was going to be mad. But then I saw that he was winning. And I said, I like that. I like winning. And I said, Bibi. And he said, yes, Donald. He has a very deep, strong voice. And I said, can I get some credit for this? If I help you with the war, can you give me a co-credit? Can I get a producer credit on the war? Maybe if we win an Oscar, I accept with you. And he says, Donald, you can do whatever you want, but Israel I will defend. And I said, okay, so that's a yes. So I'm going to take credit. And so it made me feel so much better that I might be able to look strong after looking so fat and tired and stupid and weak during my big, beautiful military parade. So Iran, an insecure, fat piece of shit. You don't want to mess with me.
I love it. All right, there you go. Now let's head over to The Daily Show, where Jordan Klepper was in the anchor chair. A little bit of what he had to say last night.
So we know where the Ayatollah is, but he's safe. We could kill him, but we won't. For now, maybe later. We'll find out next on The Golden Bachelorette, okay? How does one tweet and have 6 different positions? Clearly, we're not going to get any clarity from listening to President Trump. Maybe other people in his inner circle can shed some light on America's position. Tucker Carlson, huge supporter of the president. What do you think of the war?
I just don't want my country to be further weakened or destroyed by another one of these wars. And boy, if you can't connect the dots after 25 years of this, you're either too dumb to participate in the conversation or you're just a liar who doesn't care.
Wow. Tucker, he hasn't been this distraught since the WNBA got popular. Okay, Mr. President, I hope you understand what Tucker Carlson is saying.
I don't know what Tucker Carlson is saying. Let him go get a television network and say it so that people listen. Thank you.
Oh, snap! Trump's like, go on TV and say it, you bitch. That's right, you can't because you got kicked off Fox News for lying about me winning the 2020 election, which I appreciate, you bitch. So yes, Trump is not on the same page as Tucker, and he seems to be at odds with some of the other top MAGA minds as well.
The American people have been brainwashed into believing that America has to engage in these foreign wars in order for us to survive. And it's absolutely not true.
Oh, my God. I can't believe I'm agreeing with Marjorie Taylor Greene. I'm at war with myself. And this can't be right. Keep playing the clip. I'm sure I'll find something to disagree with her on.
They don't want to hear about politics. They want to be able to afford food, and they want to be able to afford gas, and they just want to have fun. For once in their life, they want to have fun.
Yes, I still agree with her. For once in their lives, Americans just want to have fun. I don't want a war. I want to dance. Although, you know what? I'm pretty sure Americans do know how to have fun regardless of international conflicts. I've never gotten a text saying, hey, bro, territorial dispute in the South China Sea. Barbecue's canceled. So, doesn't seem like Trump is listening to the anti-war wing of his party. Maybe he'll listen to the anti-war wing of his own administration, like Tulsi Gabbard, his own director of national intelligence.
Tulsi Gabbard testified in March that the intelligence community said Iran wasn't building a nuclear weapon.
Okay, what she said, I think they were very close to having one.
This is the benefit of appointing unqualified crazy people to your team. You can always be like, do you know how crazy and unqualified she is? I don't care what she said.
All right. There you go. Finally, let's head over to ABC. Jimmy Kimmel last night.
Donald Trump was supposed to be in Canada today, where he is not exactly the belle of the ball. Trump is about as popular in Canada right now as the Florida Panthers. But the president was there for the G7 summit. He decided to cut out a day early. Poor Melania. She thought she had one more night. President Macron of France said Trump bailed to help broker a ceasefire between Israel and Iran. For whatever reason, that rubbed Trump the wrong way. He was angry. He wrote, publicity-seeking President Emmanuel Macron of France mistakenly said that I left the G7 summit in Canada to go back to D.C. to work on a ceasefire between Israel and Iran. Wrong. He has no idea why I'm now on my way to Washington, but it certainly has nothing to do with a ceasefire. Much bigger than that, whether purposely or not. Emmanuel always gets it wrong. Stay tuned. like it's the season finale of Celebrity Apprentice or something. It's not a ceasefire. It's much bigger than that. Maybe a bowel movement? I don't know. By the way, Trump calling another president publicity-seeking is like Diddy calling you a bad boyfriend. The president has been live truthing his diplomacy attempts in real time. He wrote, I have not reached out to Iran for peace talks in any way, shape, or form. This is just more highly fabricated fake news. If they want to talk, they know how to reach me. That's right. If Iran wants to reach Trump, all they have to do is give him a $400 million plane, and he will talk to them all they want. Trump spent the afternoon guzzling Diet Cokes in the Situation Room trying to figure this out. He's in a tough spot because the American military right now is busy guarding all the Waymos here in downtown L.A. So they don't... A couple of days ago, Trump suggested that his buddy Vlad Putin broker the ceasefire in the Middle East, which is a great idea. You know the guy who won't agree to a ceasefire? Let's have him work on the ceasefire. And while you're at it, have Nick Cannon grab me a box of condoms, too, huh?
Yeah, there you go. And mentioning the Florida Panthers there at the top, shout out to Barry Hummel and his wife Darby, who were at the game last night where Florida won the Stanley Cup. They were in attendance. So congratulations to you, Barry. I think that's pretty awesome. Oh, and real quick, before Jared, Yates, Sexton, two stories I wanted to mention to pay attention to. One, apparently the Republicans are aiming to put 250+ million acres of public lands up for sale in the Senate budget reconciliation package. This is a very urgent and important situation or development because once that land gets sold, it doesn't come back for development, for energy, drilling, or housing, or whatever. And it's a really important story. I'm trying to get an expert to come on and talk to me about it today, so hopefully I will. But I wanted to mention that. And I also wanted to mention that the next big rally has been scheduled for July 17th. And that is the day that John Lewis passed away, and that's why they're doing it. And I wanted to mention that that's when the next protests are going to be. No Kings organizers set the next protest date, July 17th. Of course, this week is Juneteenth, June 19th. You may have the day off, hopefully. I'll be talking about that with the guests as well. And just so I want to mention all those headlines before, those three things before I get to Jared Yates Sexton. All right, but let's do that now. Jared is a good friend of mine and the show. He is a regular here, I think it's fair to say. You should subscribe to his Substack, Dispatches from a Collapsing State, Jared Yates, Sexton.substack.com. He's written 3 very important books, which I highly recommend that you get. He's the co-host of the Muckrake podcast. You can follow him, of course, on Substack and YouTube. And we always love talking to Jared. We talk about all kinds of things, and we get off. The first 5 or 10 minutes here is more of a personal conversation. Jared tells me that he's diagnosed himself as being autistic. I thought was interesting. He also talked about childhood trauma and how we deal with that, which we always talk about, like kind of man stuff. We mansplain to each other our emotions. We're good friends, and we love to have these kinds of conversations. So that's the first, I think, 5 or 10 minutes. And then we get into it on the news and everything else. I hope you like it. I hope you follow and support Jared, and let's do it right now. You can watch this on youtube.com/standupwithpete as well. Jared Yates Sexton, surprise, surprise. Here we are. Great to see you. Thank you for joining me here in mid-June.
Yeah, how's it going, my man? Wearing a hoodie. What's going on out there?
I got this. I went shopping at Costco, and I wasn't planning on getting clothes, but I bought a hat, some flip-flops, and these hoodies.
I mean, this is how every good political live stream starts. I went to Costco, did what I had to do.
Do you grocery shop?
Yeah. I buy my food at a market.
You go to a market and you buy all your food, and then you cook.
I go to a market. I decide what I'm going to have for dinner. I cook it. I prepare it. I eat it. Digest it. Move on.
You go to the market for each meal?
No, that would be insane.
Yeah, I thought that's what you're saying. Okay.
You prep. You decide what you're going to do. That's how you do it.
You think a lot about what you're going to eat?
No, not really. I like to cook.
Yeah.
But okay. I'm autistic. I have OCD. I eat basically the same thing every day outside of dinner.
You're autistic?
I'm autistic. Yeah. Are you shocked?
Yeah, you don't seem autistic for whatever that means.
Hell of a mask. Had to figure it out very, very early.
Huh. What are your how do you get diagnosed as autistic?
First of all, you don't get diagnosed because Robert F. Kennedy is putting you on a database, and God knows that they're preparing concentration camps for people. But I had to learn how to mask. Here I am doing my thing. Just figured it out I don't know, a few months ago. Makes sense.
Huh.
Squares a lot of circles. Here we are.
So you self-diagnosed, reading symptoms and behaviors. You're like, yeah, that's me.
When you know. I'll just put it that way. It finally solved some mysteries that had been lingering for a while.
Do you have a memory? Do you have a great memory that you can remember a lot of things in general? Is that one of the keys?
Well, I went through a lot of trauma as a child, so my memory is a little bit weird. But I can do things like speed read, photographic memory of reading, things like that. Yeah.
Have you grappled with the trauma of your childhood head on? That's what I brought you here to talk about today.
Yes. I've spent years in trauma-specific therapy. I feel like I'm on with Jiminy Glick. This is great. I love it.
Now, Jerry, you say that you had trauma. Is that right? What happened to you?
What happened to you? Are you sad?
I don't like the word trauma because I feel like there's so many different varying degrees. Everything is on a spectrum. And I feel like if you're using it, I can't use it because your trauma was real trauma.
That's not how it works. And we got to be kinder to ourselves. We all go through things in this wild tilt-a-whirl we call life. We can't compare with each other.
Tilt-a-whirl. Yeah, I agree. But still, I want words that help define adjectives attached to trauma. I always think when I think trauma, I think verbal and sexual or physical abuse, on a regular basis. But it also could mean one time you were attacked or sexually assaulted or raped. Or in my case, 9/11 was trauma, but it wasn't like one moment. It was like the days and weeks after, and just being conditioned to certain scents and certain sounds and stuff. But it doesn't like animate me every day or something that I need to cope with. That's what I mean by defining.
Yeah, but I mean, there's a whole spectrum is the right word. I mean, it can be everything from actual what you just defined, which is like intense sort of stuff, which is what I went through as a kid, or it can be accidents that have happened, injuries that have happened, or even just like not getting the attention and affection you deserved, or the care that you deserved, or whatever it is. There's a whole giant spectrum of it. And I will say that one of the defining characteristics of what we're going through right now is who has actually dealt with their shit and who hasn't. And I think that's the underpinning of a lot of what we're dealing with culturally and politically at this point.
Yeah, let's unpack that a little bit. Let's do a little bit more psychoanalysis because, we're all talking about it in our own way. And I have different ways of talking about it. Like, you made it to Tuesday, I think I opened the show with, or every day's email. Like, we're here, we're alive, let's go. But that, like, what's this day going to be like, this roller coaster of a day? If you are paying attention to the news and to politics, then you may have some real ups and downs today. And how are you going to deal with them? And it sounds like what you're saying is we deal with life and the news and the events in ways that are affected by our past. Like, we deal better or worse based on how we've dealt with our baseline and the issues that we're generally dealing with. I'm not doing a very good job of it. You take it over.
No, I think you actually nailed it. I mean, I think the thing that gets undiagnosed in all of this and under-discussed in all of it is that this isn't just a political crisis. It's also a mental health crisis. Like, you don't get cults of personality and authoritarian cults without people being like in a really bad space. I mean, like, people don't connect the dots. Like, look at what's happening in this country. And what do we keep seeing, Pete? We keep seeing these polls that America is lonelier than it's ever been, more anxious than it's ever been, more depressed than it's ever been. And when you take a look at that and you look throughout history, there is a mental health component to this that always links up to fascist movements, democratic crises. And basically at this point, all of us are like in a position where we either deal with our shit or we don't, but we are also being abused by people who have not taken care of their shit. And if you study the right-wing authoritarian mindset whatsoever and the psychology underneath it, it's a bunch of self-loathing, miserable people who project their own self-loathing and their own misery on others, and it turns into a cycle, and it makes things worse. So basically, politically, we have now seen the scaling up of like family systems up onto a national place. And those of us who grew up with this and dealt with malignant narcissists and abusers, the moment that man came down the golden escalator, we all knew exactly what this thing was. And we all recognized it immediately. And so it needs understood that we are both fighting a political battle, but we're also fighting personal battles, social battles, relational battles, and all of that sort of comes together.
That's a pretty good general analysis, psychoanalysis of the MAGA movement, the self-loathing and miserable and jealous and angry and bitter. But, you can be a progressive, liberal-minded person and have all of those emotions as well. So what's the difference? Is it how we act out? And like, why it's what you look for for security or for leadership, or it sounds like what we hear a lot is for blame. Like, if I'm stuck in a situation in life with my job, with my marriage, with my health, with my finances, there's a number of choices I can make or things I can think. If anybody was ever showed me them, I don't think we all have the same choices or opportunities, obviously. But it seems like on the right, a lot of times they want to blame all that self-loathing on somebody else or some group or some entity. But I mean, I'll blame some of mine on what we're seeing play out in the country too.
Yeah, and I think when it comes to right-wing people, the research that I've done is that they grew up in particularly like very, very specific situations, whether or not it was an authoritarian family, an authoritarian church, an authoritarian community or culture. And those things sort of inform it. And basically what they're taught at a very young age is to hate something within themselves. Maybe they're gay, maybe they're sensitive, maybe they aren't like, maybe their goals aren't aligned with what they are supposed to be. And as a result, they kill that part of themselves, or they repress that part of themselves. And then they go out in the world and try and destroy it. And they turn it into something evil. And what you just brought up, even in progressive, leftist, liberal, all these other circles, Pete, we see authoritarianism not just in politics. We see it in the workplace. We see it in relationships. We see it in communities. And it just finds its sort of release in these interactions, whether or not it's like siding with the boss against somebody that you care about, mistreating a partner, or doing these things unconsciously. We're all sort of living this life where we have to decide if we have agency or if we're aware of what we're doing. And a lot of these people, and Donald Trump and the people around him, MAGA, fascism, you name it, they're essentially on a bender. They essentially have an enabler in Donald Trump and other authoritarians who tell people, and this is, I think, the main appeal of MAGA for a lot of people, it's the freedom of unfreedom. It's not having to make choices. It's not having to be self-introspective. It's basically telling people, no, you are right. Everyone else is wrong. Think less about who you are.
It's what we would want government to be for us is also what I'm hearing to a certain extent, like the freedom to not have to make choices about testing my water or putting up my own stop sign or hiring teachers and teaching my kids. Like all of the functions of government I want to trust are good and safe and well-intentioned. But for generations in America, Americans have been told government is the problem. So Trump comes in like many authoritarians and says, I alone can do it. I'll take care of you. He becomes this father figure, and they trust him more than all of the rest of the government bureaucrats and leaders ever before who are all corrupt. Somehow he's going to take care of it for us. We all would like that in our lives, but you only allow for it and you only depend on people and entities when you trust in them and when you believe in them and when you know that you can.
Well, and what you're talking about is the difference between trust and unearned trust. And it really helps to look through the lens of like the die was rolled the moment that they started calling him daddy. Daddy's home and he's pissed, right? Like, because that is the essence of it. They want to be children. And we all might remember that when we were kids, maybe we looked at our parents and we thought they were perfect, that we thought they were godlike, they couldn't make mistakes. And by the way, people like me who grew up in the environment that I had, I never thought that. That's one of the reasons why I've been able to be very hypervigilant about what's been going on for the past 10 years. But a lot of Americans are in a place of arrested development. They look at him as an infallible father figure.
Yeah.
And there is another gradient of this, Pete, which is we spent way too long being like, we don't need to worry about politics. The professionals have it. And this is something that's not just pertinent to MAGA and the right wing. Like, you have to be suspicious of every politician. Every politician has to earn your trust, and you have to judge them based on what they do, not just in the moment, but over a long period of time. And that's one of the reasons why democracy suffered, is because the administrative state, which started in the early 20th century, told us don't worry about this stuff. The experts have it. You don't have to pay attention to it. We'll go ahead and run this thing. And so as a result, we became complacent. And we became much more focused on earning and gaining and buying and status and you name it. And as that happens, democracy starts to wither away until someone looks for a father figure. And it just so happens that this one is an abusive asshole who is incapable and surrounds himself with abusive, incapable assholes.
Well said. What about the idea, a different question now, a little bit different subject, but just I'm a sucker for any MAGA person or Trump person saying, I was wrong. I got it wrong. He's bad. I don't support him anymore after this. I'm a sucker for it. And I'm also convinced that there's not a critical mass of former Trumpers or former MAGA people or people leaving the cult that makes enough of a difference. And then the next question always becomes, is there anything that he could do that would turn people away? The answer is yes. There is. Yep. There are a lot of things that you could do to turn people away. But the second question is, well, how many? And so specifically, you may shit on this or push back on it, but I have always thought that right-wing media is so influential and wags the dog of Republican ideology, and it's not the case on the other hand. It's becoming more so, I think, to a certain extent, as progressive media starts to gain a foothold on online, independently especially. But in this case, when you hear Tucker Carlson yesterday, and then you hear Dave Smith, who's like become, I just can't even believe it because I knew him before anybody did as a comic, has become this very influential, one of the leaders of the libertarian American movement of our generation. Yesterday, Dave Smith said, "I'm out. I no longer support Trump." And it was over the war in Iran. And also he's very anti-Israel, I think, So then getting involved. And then you hear Tucker Carlson saying, this is what happened to Bush. Iraq war ruined Bush, and this, I think, will ruin Trump. So my point is, I feel like one thing that breaks the fever, the MAGA, a little bit is when the most influential voices in right-wing media start to pull away. Maybe they'll go back. Maybe it doesn't make a difference. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. And I think there are different sort of forms of this. When we talk about supporters, it depends on where they are in their lives and how it is that they view it, because the essence of what we're talking about right now is cognitive dissonance. It's the ability to hold two separate things in mind, and eventually the mind unconsciously goes towards the one that it already believed. When it comes to Tucker Carlson, Dave Smith, Alex Jones is having a moment like this. And listen, I watch and listen to way too much Alex Jones because it is just a Rosetta Stone.
Oh, I didn't know. I'm looking
wing.
up what he's saying or what he's been doing, but yeah.
Oh, well, I mean, it all started with the breakup between Elon Musk and Donald Trump, which were his two daddies. And the entire point is that right-wing authoritarianism is so chock full of contradictions that each moment that sort of occurs, it creates so much tension that some of this stuff is going to break. Tucker Carlson's bag, and this is the thing, there are different strains within MAGA. Tucker Carlson's entire fortune and livelihood is based on white nationalism and evangelicalism, Christian nationalism. And by the way, hatred of Jews. Right? They like sort of using those conspiracy theories. So this is the perfect type of thing to lead to Tucker Carlson saying, you know what, you've been listening to me, you've been watching to me. Speaking of market segmentation, I know exactly who it is that is watching me and wants to watch this stuff. I don't think it is a coincidence whatsoever that Vladimir Putin, who Tucker Carlson is like completely enthralled to, and that's part of his whole like Christian nationalist thing. Vladimir Putin doesn't want this war to happen, particularly because he's allies with both Iran and Israel, that all of a sudden that all sort of drifts down. And so you are going to see all these different strains. We think about MAGA as this homogenized movement. It's not. There are like 6 or 7 different segmented movements that are within it that are constantly in conflict with each other. So we have to take advantage of those moments because there are people who can move away from this. Others are cultists and they're going to go down with this ship. But we, as opponents and adversaries, we have to take advantage of those moments of friction and torque.
Yeah, well, we're trying to, right? We're trying to take advantage of those moments, and it's hard because we're not all organized and we're not all on the same page, although this past weekend was a pretty big deal, I think. It's hard to know what the numbers were, whether 1 million, 2 million, 5 million people, over 2,000 locations, a little bit easier to count how many rallies there were, what counts as a rally, is it 5 people, thousands of people? I went to mine in Rockland County, and it was really amazing. A lot of solidarity. You see people out there. You realize you're not alone, that there are other people that, like you, care about people they don't know. I feel like that's the easiest way to put this modern ideology of those of us that are against what's happening. I care about people I don't know, specifically these immigrants right now. Who are unquote undocumented and working and doing important jobs. What do you make of the No Kings protest Saturday and the general resistance movement and where we're at here in mid-June? 10% of the way through Trump's 4 years, apparently, if he gets all 4.
I was incredibly inspired and emboldened by it. And I think these types of protests are incredibly important to go out and see you're not alone and you're not powerless. I mean, going out into my city, which is in a red state, and seeing, upwards of 10,000 people coming together for blocks and blocks and people honking and just chanting and taking care of each other, engaging in mutual aid, incredibly inspiring. I think this is a good sign but we also can't let it like devolve into self-congratulation. The idea that simply because we had the largest one-day protest in the United States of America, the fact that that happened doesn't mean that the job is done. And I think people need to keep something in mind, which is this isn't going to be a movement that defeats MAGA until we're not just protesting against MAGA and Trump. We have an alternative to it. And so if you take a look at popular movements, revolutionary movements, which this has the potential to become, you have to start coagulating and creating an agenda. You have to start creating asks, which is, what is it that we want to accomplish? And it's not enough to just get Trump out of office. We have to move beyond Trump and move beyond the normal that came before him. I think the agenda and the platform is pretty obvious what it should be, but it's also going to take conversation. It's going to take bargaining. It's going to take collaboration, which is hard and messy. But I think over time, this will eventually come together if we keep doing this. But it was not, I wrote about this over in Dispatches from a Collapsing State. This has to be the beginning. It can't be the end. And unfortunately in America, we have spent a lot of time congratulating ourselves about showing up like this, as opposed to saying, okay, this was a great jumping off point. And on top of that, Pete, there's a lot of danger right now in this country, and it's only going to grow. It's not going to be as easy as showing up on a Saturday. It's going to be an ongoing process, and we need to really steel ourselves against that.
Are you familiar? I wasn't. I'm just looking in the chat with the 3.5% rule.
Yeah. The idea is if 3.5% of the population fights against the regime, that the regime will fall. And I think that is a really catchy thing that shows up in memes a lot of the time, but I don't know that is necessarily going to be the truth. And on top of that, we have a hell of a situation on our hands here where we have a media that is owned by the wealth class that, reported on this, but didn't treat it the same way they did with the Tea Party. We have a Democratic quote unquote resistance party that doesn't really want to change all that much and doesn't really want to align itself with this. So I do think that something like that holds water, but I think it's going to take conflict. It's going to take collective action. It's going to take general strikes and mass collective action. And that's going to take a while. The entrenched power that we're dealing with is very strong in this country.
No doubt about it. And we're seeing that play out all over the country, obviously. What do you make of what's happened in the streets of California last week? The introduction of National Guard for the first time since segregation, and that the president overruled or sent the National Guard without a request. The first time, that was a pretty big deal. And then first time the Marines are out there, and the Marines, by the way, it's becoming a little bit easier, and I have credibility on issues around veterans, so I don't mind saying it. And I'm a comedian, but it's becoming a little bit easier to be critical of the military in the U.S. It used to be forbidden, but they sent the Marines out in L.A., and the first guy they arrested was a veteran who was going to work, who wasn't breaking any rules, but stepped across the line, and it looked real bad. They looked real bad marching in that parade. They don't look prepared at all. They don't look intimidating. And to be fair, with all due respect, we have not won a military conflict in our lifetime or our parents' lifetime. Our parents, in Vietnam lost everywhere, lost in Iraq. We lose every major conflict that we have gotten in, no matter how good our technology, no matter how well trained and resourced. You can't beat an insurgency. And so neither can Israel in Iran, is my opinion. But what do you make of the military in the streets in LA, that order, and what it says about our current authoritarian moment?
Well, it's only going to grow. It's going to move to Chicago. It's going to move to New York City. I think it's time we face that there is a plan to go after political opposition in these cities. It's a cultural revolution. Yeah, because
situation. I read yesterday 2 of 3 of the biggest, most undocumented people in America are in Florida and Texas, and they don't seem to be targeting the red states. They're targeting California, Illinois, so Chicago, LA, and New York.
Yeah, and it's not by accident. Basically, there's been a deal that has been struck between Trump and the wealth class. He's not going to go after immigrants who are being exploited by the wealth class in order for cheap labor. In fact, this isn't about getting rid of all immigrants. It's about getting rid of as many immigrants as possible and creating a subclass of exploitable workers who aren't going to ask for more, and they'll do whatever, that they're told to do. And Pete, this is an uncomfortable thing that I have to say. And I every time I have this conversation now, I apologize because, people are free to disagree with me. I understand if it makes people feel itchy. What I've learned about fascism is that when fascists show up in your town, you meet them in the streets and you let them know that they're not welcome. And that doesn't mean showing them signs. That doesn't mean, chanting a few things. I'm not worried about Waymos being set on fire. I'm not worried about rocks being thrown. I'm not worried about clashes with police. I think we are in a very, very volatile situation in which the monopolization of violence by the state is not in play anymore. I think the covenant between the people and the state has been broken, and I do think that we are heading towards something really, really ugly, and we need to reconsider how we look at this thing. And Los Angeles, Angelinos, I tip my hat to them. They are showing up the way that they need to show up, and they are taking care of their neighbors, they're taking care of their friends, they're taking care of their coworkers and loved ones and even strangers. And that's what we all have to do. We have a Gestapo in this country. And you can't just say, well, that would be bad if we had a conflict with them. If people who are unidentified, masked, and they don't have any warrants, if they're going to show up and do this, they're not law enforcement. They're Gestapo. And history tells us you do not allow that to happen. And I know that's uncomfortable and it's not territory most people want to head into, but I still think it's the truth.
I agree with that. And I think that's what we're seeing in California. It's just who's doing it? Who's going out there and confronting those people? It's not white progressives with great lives and kids. Why would you do that if you had a good life?
Well, and that's also a question here too, is that I think a lot of white moderates, white liberals, and white progressives are going to be faced with a pretty big choice at this point. The choice has been there for forever. But now it's time to actually make the choice, which is, are you willing to put your life and livelihood and privilege and comfort on the line?
No.
Because that's what authoritarianism asks of us. It gives us an unconscious question, which is, am I actually going to stand up for what I believe are my principles, or are my principles not real? And that is a question that a lot of white people are going to have to choose in the next few
years. Your principles are real. You wish it were different, but you're not going to put your life on the line or make sacrifices to make it different. That's a huge
Well, then I don't think they're principles. I think that those are slogans and things you say on social media in order to gain clout and attention.
Yeah, I mean, if you're saying them on social media, if you're openly like advocating for something and not doing anything, you're not doing a great job. But I do think
I would argue that we have a faux political conscience in this country, which tells us that we can meme our way out of it. We can subscribe to things that'll get our way out of it. We'll buy t-shirts, we'll buy mugs, we'll do all of those things. But when the rubber meets the road, are you actually going to fight an authoritarian regime? Because here's the thing, Pete, and I just want to put this out there and lay my cards on the table. Like, I've meant what I've said over the last 10 years. That's the thing. I wasn't just doing this in order to gain social media followings. I wasn't doing this to sell books. I saw something coming. I saw that it was dangerous. I wasn't LARPing. I wasn't pretending. I know a lot of people were, and I know that they didn't consciously think that, but I think it's time for people to realize that we're actually in the shit. And you have to make decisions at that point. Are you pretending, or are they actual principles? And I think people have to make up their minds about that.
I think memes make more of a difference than you're giving them credit for.
Oh, no, I don't disagree. There's a difference.
I'm joking.
Okay, let me be specific.
No,
and this is one of the reasons I love talking to you.
Joking.
No, you'll push back in the right places. So here's what I'll say. I think memes are incredible for communication purposes, and they sort of hit a very specific region of the brain. I think there's a difference between memes that communicate things and memes that are catharsis. They give us a quick chuckle or a release, and it takes away from the discomfort of the moment.
I think what you're saying, and this is what I've always tried to be as well, is the change that you want to see. And it was always, I think that while it was the right thing to do, it was also the smart thing to do in terms of branding. Like way back at my SiriusXM days, I remember, being an early, at the very beginning, I've always cared about the environment. And so back in 2009, I was talking with climate scientists like Michael Mann about climate change. And then came time to get a new car. And it was 2010. I was like, I'm going to get a plug-in. I got a Chevy Volt. And then I got solar panels. And I got it not because I thought it was, making a difference in the environment. I got it because if I was talking on the microphone and saying that we should do these things, then I had to do those things. But we're not talking as much about our consumer and our consumption in those cases now We're talking about something different. We're talking about you got to get out. You got to get out in the streets. You got to do more. I mean, not everybody can get out in the streets. There's all kinds of things that you can do to help organize, but you've got to do more than just buy the right thing or vote the right way or say the right thing.
You're talking about something that is intertwined that a lot of people don't understand, which is that under neoliberalism, which has been the consensus since the late 1970s, neoliberalism tells us that you vote with your dollars. Democracy isn't real. Mass politics isn't real. Basically, everything is going to stay the same for the status quo. Where you make your choices are the things that you buy. And the insidious thing that happened in the 1980s is that we were convinced that the purchases we made defined us as people. That was the most incredible thing about capitalism is all of a sudden it's like you took the spirit of the 60s and 70s, that individualism, and then you go out and buy the products that say, this is who I am. It's the character that I play. And yes, you can do those. You can make decisions based on what you buy or what you don't buy, but it's whether or not that's a stand-in for your actual political operation and political life. And a lot of people in this country have confused that the purchases you make stand in for actual small d democratic action. And now all of a sudden we're in a place where you kind of have to walk and chew gum at the same time. And most people in this country aren't aware that that's even a thing, and they're not taught how to do it, which has put us at an incredible disadvantage.
Yes, well, I guess we have to learn how to do it or teach others how to do it or share ideas about it.
We gotta build this plane while we fly it.
I don't want to.
I don't either. Okay, can I say real fast? I'm so glad you said that.
Yeah.
One of the most powerful things that I've learned in therapy, Pete, is if I am in a situation that I don't want to be in, like, I don't know, there's an authoritarian coup in the country and we're having to deal with it, it's to say out loud in a frustrated voice, I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
I don't want this to happen.
Good.
And then radical acceptance comes in and you're like, well, fuck it. This is happening.
Oh, that's well done. That's some good stuff. That's some good philosophy or spirituality. And I'm glad I said it.
It's something.
It is. I think radical acceptance is a really important idea, notion for people to read and think about. But it is. That's the point. Is that I didn't want this. We were supposed to be in a different place. You know, once Obama got elected, I was really excited for my daughter's future about where this country was going, and so it's just such a shock that we're here now, and everything that we're going to have to do probably for the rest of our lives to get back some sense of normalcy or to beat back the authoritarian tendencies of a frighteningly large percentage of our friends and neighbors.
It's not the fight that we wanted, but it's the fight that we have.
I don't want it.
I don't want it either. I would much rather that we would have avoided this. And that's something that I've had so much grief about.
I want to fight for gay people to serve openly in the military. That was a good fight. Sure. I got into it. That worked. We won. Gay marriage worked. We won. Healthcare, we didn't get anything near what we deserve and need, but we got something, and we put some regulations.
But here's the good news. Everything that you just brought up shouldn't even be a controversy. Those things shouldn't even be a debate. Wow. That should be the moderate centrist position. And what we had before Trump was offensive. It was scraps. We were suffering indignities. We now have the chance, because the seal has been broken, to create something better, to have the world that we deserve. And yes, it sucks. And no, I don't want it either. But we have the opportunity to create the world that we deserve. And we can do it. Period.
You think so?
Yeah, I do. I don't think it's going to be pretty. I think there's going to be a lot of tragedy. There's going to be a lot of suffering. I don't want to sugarcoat it. I think it's going to be a very, very awful period. And I think you and I and the people watching and listening are going to have to do a lot of things that we don't want to do. And we're going to suffer, and we're going to have setbacks, and we're going to have tragedies. But I think in the long run, we're going to win this thing. I think my God, we might have a world war before the end of the week. We don't even know at this point. There's going to be a lot of awfulness, but I think that we can win this thing. Yes.
I like to hear you saying that. I wonder what looks. I wonder what winning looks like. I wonder how long it takes. I wonder what.
Can I just, Pete? I'm not an evangelical, but there's something to learn about Moses in the wilderness. You know what I mean? Like the idea that you occasionally you may not get to see the promised land. You and I might not get to see the spoils of our victory, but we need to do it anyway in order to get to where we need to get. And will you? I hope to God that we will see it. I hope that we will spend part of our lives in a better country and a better future. But like the task, it doesn't change it. We still have to head in a direction.
How much are you thinking about writing or considering the midterm elections of 2026? It's like in a normal, even Trump's first term. I don't think we were concerned that if we lost, we would lose everything, and rightfully so. But I don't think that we were that concerned that they would be free and fair midterm elections in 2018. In 2000, is it 18? Yeah, the midterm elections, I believe. But these upcoming, so we had normal conversations about what Democrats should do, or about the political conversation, or about activism, or about voting, and obviously primaries and candidates and so on. But like, I feel like we can't really talk about the midterm elections in terms of, why people are going to vote the way they're going to vote, and how to get them out to vote, and how to organize, because I'm really concerned about what they might do, what kind of games they might play around the midterm election. So how much are you even thinking about those elections for the House, especially, where I think if they pass this bill, it would be the worst thing they could do for their upcoming election.
I'll be honest with you. I don't think about the midterms even a little bit.
Okay.
No, I don't take that for granted anymore. I think actually, you know what it reminds me of, Pete? It reminds me of being a kid in a dirt poor family and them not making good financial decisions and talking about when they're going to win the lottery. It's magical. It's magical thinking. I do not take the midterms or the 2028 election for granted. Yeah. That is not where my mind is at. It is in the actual grassroots movement and organizing building. And what's more, Pete, like, even if the Democrats were to win the House in 2026 as they're presently constituted, it isn't going to make a difference. Like, it actually isn't. Like, something major has to change in order for something to move here. And it has to be the creation of a movement that asks more. There has to be an alternative to Trumpism. And there just isn't right now. So no, I don't think about the midterms whatsoever. It's magical thinking to think that they're going to be free and fair. If they are, my God, that would be a pleasant surprise. You found $20 in your pants that you haven't worn in a while. But no, I'm not taking that for granted.
What do you make of the assassination of these two Minnesota, well, everybody knows who I'm talking about, the one assassination, the other assassination attempt, and, I mean, this guy who did it, like, do we need much more reporting to determine that he was a Christian nationalist, that he believed what they don't all believe the exact same shit, but this guy went to some serious religious schools. He did some serious preaching and activism around anti-abortion, anti-gay, came from a certain thread of Christianity that is bad. And he targeted, obviously, Democrats, supported Trump. Like, I feel like the media is not talking about him the way that he should be talked about, which is usually the case with white Christian extremists. But we all know that if that guy was Muslim and not even religious, much less an actual religious fundamentalist who had done this, it would be a different story. And it's always the case. But this is crazy. And the chill that it puts on people who are serving currently, much less who might consider running, I can't imagine the ripple effect. I couldn't blame anybody for deciding to not run or not run again.
Well, I mean, look at the people who are being targeted around this country. It's politicians, it's public figures, it's people who, are scientists, experts, doctors, you name it. And I want to go ahead and call it what it is, which is that we have a domestic terrorism problem in this country that nobody wants to sit with, which is that we have right-wing extremists. And it's not just this assassination. It's not just people being mailed bombs who are in the media and politicians. It's every mass shooting where a manifesto comes out and talks about white replacement. It's every manifesto that comes out and talks about immigration. It's every manifesto that comes out and repeats these same ideas. We don't want to connect the dots, because if we connected the dots, we would have to do something about it. And so this isn't the first time it's happening. It is a long-running, long-standing problem. It just so happens that now it's getting to the point where it's becoming much, much more regular. And it's the equivalent of like looking outside and seeing that there are wasps building a nest, and you're like, I'll take care of that in a couple of days. And a couple of days becomes a couple of weeks, a couple of years, 10 years, 20 years. And all of a sudden you walk outside and you're like, they are stinging everything that they can find. We have a problem that we haven't wanted to name, we haven't wanted to deal with, and we've been in denial about it because to actually accept what is happening would mean that you would have to stop it. And that, unfortunately, is what has led us to this moment.
Finally, just got to ask you about your piece at your Substack back at the end of May. Everybody should subscribe if they're not already. Jared Yates, Sexton.substack.com, dispatches from a collapsing state. You wrote a piece called The Whole Dumb Joe Rogan Thing, which I really liked, and everybody should go read. But say just a little bit about it. I don't know exactly what question, but you basically, say the Democratic Party, the progressive movement needs what?
Well, I mean, the Democratic Party actually, the problem isn't messaging. And if you listen to all of the lanyard class and the strategists and the communication experts, they really think that Americans are just stupid. And so they don't understand what's good for them. That's why they represent the professional managerial class. They're so much smarter and so much better than everybody else. Post 2024, what have they done? They've blamed the groups. Right, which basically means people of color, gay and trans people, all of these groups fighting for better lives. And so they think that if they can just get a propagandist, which, by the way, doesn't even understand who Joe Rogan is. Joe Rogan gained popularity because he absolutely doesn't think about what he's saying before he says it, and he's not actually beholden to anybody.
Right.
Like, he decides to endorse Trump and move away from Trump on a day-to-day basis. But the Democratic Party is interested in getting a propaganda tool. They have no idea how to talk to normal people. They have no idea how to talk to young men. They just spent over $20 million doing that. They just created the Abundance Movement, which is funded by the Walmart family and every other oligarch in this country that is basically like, I know what'll get people. Deregulation. No, shut the fuck up. That's not what's going to get the Democratic Party in a better position. It's when the lanyard class and the strategist class, when they move to the side and actual normal people who want something and deserve something are able to start to determine the agenda. It's not the message. It's not the messenger. It's the fact that they don't have a plan. They don't have something to put forward, and that's why people reject them at this point.
All right. I said 30 minutes and I did 40 with you, and I appreciate you very much. I hope everybody goes and subscribes to your Substack and listens to the Muckrake podcast and supports you over there. It's been too long. I always say that, and then time passes, but we connect. We talked for a while before. It was like a warm blanket.
Oh, you're my warm blanket.
It's like a nice hug.
It's like a nice weighted blanket. I enjoy it.
Yeah.
Thank you, my friend. Everybody stay safe. These are dangerous times.
Thank you, Jared. All right. Jared Yates Sexton, and you can punch out, buddy, and I'll just say good night to everybody. Good night.
All right, pal.
Good afternoon. Good morning. Whatever time you're watching this.
Good luck.
Good luck. And George Clooney.
Later, bud.
Good night and good luck. There he goes. Yeah, there he goes. There I go. That is it. That's the end of the interview, and that is the end of today's show. Thank you so much for pressing play. I hope you got a lot out of it. I hope you appreciated it. I put a lot of work into it. Thank you very much to all of you who are paid subscribers, to new paid subscribers, and to those of you that listen all the way to the end of the show. There's a name for you. I call you the Bumblebees. And I love to hear from you Bumblebees who listen all the way to the end. And Jon Carroll's song here, which is playing at the end of every show. Jon Carroll is an amazing Grammy Award-winning singer, songwriter, former founding member of the Starland Vocal Band, and we love Jon Carroll. So go download his new album, which is available at joncarroll.org, and take care of your mental health, take care of yourself, do something for someone else, whatever you can to make yourself feel good, to navigate as we get through, try to get through these hard times that we are all dealing with, that we weren't expecting to have to deal with, as I was talking about with Jared. And I will talk to you right here tomorrow